The sound of the bones snapping still echoed in my head. But the sound of the cop laughing was louder. I stood in the sterile hospital hallway, watching Officer Ryder Mayolf swing to his partner, while my 16-year-old son screamed in agony behind the emergency curtain. Ryder glanced at me, a quiet gray-haired dad in a flannel shirt, and actually winked. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't know he was laughing in the face of a man who used to dismantle warlords for a living. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Chapter 1. The waiting room smelled like bleach and cheap coffee, a scent that usually reminded me of boredom, but tonight it smelled like violence. I sat on the edge of a hard plastic chair, my hands clasped loosely between my knees. To anyone walking by, I looked like a defeated father. My shoulders were slumped, my head was down, I was the picture of a man who had been beaten by the system. But inside, my mind was running through a checklist I hadn't used in 15 years. Target, male, 6'2", roughly 220 pounds. Threat assessment, arrogant, armed, undisciplined. Status, active, hostile. Officer Ryder was standing 20 feet away at the nurse's station. He was loud, he was taking up space, leaning back against the counter like he owned the building. He was telling a joke to a young nurse who looked terrified of him. "So, I told the kid," Ryder said, his voice carrying clearly down the hall. "If you don't want to trip, don't run. Gravity is a law, you know. I just helped enforce it." His partner chuckled nervously. Ryder threw his head back and laughed. My son Mason was in that room behind them. The doctor had come out 10 minutes ago with a grim look on his face. "Tibial plateau fracture," he had said. "Shattered kneecap. Multiple contusions." Mason played varsity soccer. He was the captain. He was supposed to be looking at colleges next year. Now the doctor wasn't sure if he would ever walk without a limp, let alone run. And this cop was laughing about gravity. I stood up. My movement was slow, deliberate. I walked over to the nurse's station. Ryder stopped laughing as I approached. He turned slowly, hooking his thumbs into his tactical vest. He looked me up and down, dismissing me instantly. I was just a civilian. I was nobody. "Officer," I said. My voice was low. I didn't shout. Shouting shows weakness. "My son says you stomped on his leg after he was already on the ground. He says he wasn't running." Ryder chewed his gum loudly. He stepped into my personal space, trying to intimidate me. It was a classic bully move. "Your son is a liar," Ryder said, smiling without his eyes. "And he's lucky I didn't charge him with assaulting an officer. He tripped. I tried to catch him. End of story." "He has a boot print on his thigh," I said calmly. "That doesn't happen from tripping." Ryder's face hardened. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Listen to me, Pops. You file a complaint and I'll bury that kid in charges. Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, maybe even possession if I look hard enough in his backpack. Do we understand each other? Take the L and go home." I looked into his eyes. I saw the darkness there, the absolute lack of empathy. This wasn't a cop. This was a predator hiding behind a badge. "I understand perfectly," I said. Ryder smirked, tapped my chest with 2 fingers hard, and walked away. "Good. Smart man." He had no idea. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Brooke, my wife. "I'm here." "Which room?" I turned away from the cop and headed back to the trauma unit. Brooke came rushing through the double doors a moment later. She looked frantic, her purse slipping off her shoulder, her heels clicking rapidly on the linoleum. Usually, Brooke was the fierce one. If a teacher gave Mason a bad grade unfairly, she was in the principal's office the next morning. If a neighbor's dog barked too late, she was knocking on their door. I expected her to be breathing fire, but when she saw me, she didn't look angry. She looked terrified. "Is he okay?" she whispered, grabbing my arm. Her hands were ice cold. Did he say anything?" "He's sedated now," I said. "Brooke, that cop over there, Ryder, he did this on purpose. He crushed Mason's knee. He was laughing about it." I waited for the explosion. I waited for her to march over there and demand his badge number. Instead, Brooke went pale. She looked over my shoulder at Ryder, who was still hanging around the exit. She shrank back, pulling me toward the wall. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "What?" I frowned, looking at her. "Brooke, he crippled our son." I know, but she looked around nervously, her eyes darting everywhere except my face. "Mason can be mouthy. You know that. Maybe he provoked them. We can't just accuse a police officer of brutality. We have to be careful." I stepped back from her. It felt like the floor had tilted. Provoked. He was walking home from the library. He's 16. Brooke, why are you defending him? I'm not defending him, she snapped, her voice cracking. I'm protecting our family. You don't know how things work in this town. If we make a scene, they'll make our lives miserable. Let's just focus on Mason getting better, okay? Let's not make this into a war. A war? That was the second time tonight someone had mentioned war. I didn't start it, I said coldly. But I'm going to finish it. No, she grabbed my shirt, her eyes wide and pleading. Promise me you won't do anything crazy. Promise me you won't file a report yet. Please, for Mason. I stared at my wife. There was sweat on her upper lip. She was trembling. This wasn't just maternal worry. This was fear. Deep, visceral fear. Or maybe guilt. I'm going to see our son, I said, pulling away from her. I walked into the trauma room. Mason was awake, staring at the ceiling. His face was gray with pain. His leg was propped up on a mountain of pillows wrapped in thick white plaster. He looked at me and his chin wobbled. Dad, I'm here, buddy. I sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand. I'm right here. I didn't run. He choked out, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. I swear I stopped. I put my hands up. He kicked my feet out, and when I was on the ground, he put his boot on my knee, and he pushed. He kept asking me if I wanted to cry. I squeezed his hand, feeling a rage so hot it almost blinded me. I believe you. Brooke came into the room. She hovered by the door, not coming closer. Mason, she said, her voice tight. Honey, are you sure you didn't slip? It was dark. Maybe you just fell wrong. Mason looked at his mother. The confusion on his face broke my heart. Mom, he stomped on me. People remember things wrong when they're scared. Brooke said quickly, walking over and smoothing the blanket, but avoiding looking at his injuries. The officer said it was an accident during the arrest. If we say otherwise, it's your word against his. And he's a sergeant. Why does that matter? Mason asked, his voice rising. He broke my leg. Lower your voice, Brooke snapped. She looked at the open door. Stop acting like a victim. We just need to heal and move on. The room went silent. Mason pulled his hand away from hers. He looked at me, then turned his head away, staring at the wall. I stood up. The air in the room felt suffocating. I'm going to get coffee, I lied. I walked out of the room, past the nurse's station, and out the automatic doors into the cool night air. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. My wife was gaslighting our son. She was terrified of Officer Ryder. She wanted this to go away immediately. Why? I walked to the far end of the ambulance bay into the shadows. I lit a cigarette, a habit I had quit 10 years ago, but tonight I needed it. I watched the hospital entrance. A few minutes later, the automatic doors opened. Brooke walked out. She had her phone to her ear. She wasn't looking for me. She was pacing back and forth, looking agitated. I stayed in the shadows, perfectly still. In my old life, I could sit in a Hyundai for 3 days without moving a muscle. Standing here for 3 minutes was nothing. She stopped pacing and spoke into the phone. Her voice was hushed, but the wind carried it right to me. I told him to shut up, she whispered harshly. Yes, I handled it, but he's angry. You went too far, Ryder. You said you were just going to scare him. You didn't say you were going to put him in the hospital. My heart stopped. The cigarette fell from my fingers. You said you were just going to scare him. She wasn't just scared of the cop, she knew him. She had talked to him before this happened. She knew this was coming. She listened to the voice on the other end, then shook her head. No, he won't. I'll make sure he doesn't file the report. Just stay away from us for a while. If he finds out, he'll kill us both. She hung up and wiped her face, composing herself before turning back toward the hospital doors. I waited until she was gone. I waited until the motion sensor doors slid shut behind her. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. The shaking was gone. The confusion was gone. My wife had set our son up. She had conspired with the man who crippled him. I didn't know why yet. I didn't know how deep it went, but as I stood there in the dark watching the red lights of the ambulance bay, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her tonight. I wasn't going to yell. That's what a normal husband would do, but I wasn't a normal husband anymore. The retired dad in the flannel shirt had just left the building. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called since I left the unit. It rang twice. It's me, I said quietly. I'm active. Location? The voice on the other end asked. Homefront, I said, staring at the hospital where my family lay broken in more ways than one. I need full surveillance on 2 targets. One is a police sergeant named Ryder, And the second, I said, my voice turning to ice, is my wife. The drive home from the hospital felt like drowning in silence. Mason was unconscious in the back seat, his breathing shallow and uneven. Brooke sat in the passenger seat, her body turned toward the window, her thumb tapping restlessly against her phone screen. She hadn't looked at our son once. She hadn't asked how he was feeling, or if he needed anything. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every time I glanced at her profile in the dim glow of the dashboard, I heard that whispered phone call playing on a loop in my head. You went too far, Ryder. We pulled into the driveway just after midnight. I carried Mason inside, his weight almost nothing compared to the heaviness pressing on my chest. His cast scraped against the doorframe as I maneuvered him through the narrow hallway into the guest room on the first floor. There was no way he could navigate stairs for months. I laid him down gently on the bed. He groaned, half awake, his face twisting in pain. Sorry, buddy, I whispered, adjusting the pillows under his legs. I know it hurts, Dad. His voice was barely a whisper. Am I in trouble? No, I said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why does Mom keep saying I did? I froze. Mason's eyes were closed, but tears were leaking from the corners. He had heard everything. He had heard his own mother trying to convince him that his trauma was his fault. She's just scared. I lied. People say things they don't mean when they're scared. She's not scared for me, Mason mumbled, his words slurring as the painkillers dragged him back under. She's scared of him. I sat there in the dark, watching my son's chest rise and fall. His words hung in the air like smoke. Brooke appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat. She looked like she was about to bolt. I'm going to the pharmacy, she said quickly, not meeting my eyes. He needs his prescription filled. I can go, I offered, standing up. No, her voice came out too sharp, too panicked. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No, you stay with him. I just need to be useful. I'll be right back. She turned and practically ran out the front door. I walked to the living room window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. She didn't turn right toward the 24-hour pharmacy on Main Street. She turned left toward the older part of town where the bars and the precinct were located. I let her go. My contacts were already tracking her phone. I spent the night in a chair next to Mason's bed, my mind running through scenarios and timelines. I thought about the last 6 months. The late nights Brooke claimed were client dinners. The sudden password on her phone. The way she had brushed off Mason's story 2 weeks ago when he mentioned getting pulled over by a cop named Ryder for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. When the sun came up, I made Mason breakfast and waited for the home nurse to arrive. Brooke came downstairs looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. I have errands to run, I said, pulling on my jacket. What kind of errands? She asked, her voice tight. I'm going to the police station, I said flatly, to file that report. Brooke's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. I thought we discussed this. We agreed to wait. You agreed to wait? I corrected her. I didn't agree to anything. You're going to make this worse, she hissed. You don't know how things work in this town. If you go down there making accusations, they'll bury us. They already buried us, I said. Our son is in a wheelchair. I walked out before she could respond. The police station was a squat brick building in the center of town. I walked through the front doors with calm precision. A heavy-set officer sat behind the front desk, barely glancing up from his computer. Help you? He grunted. I need to file a formal complaint against Sergeant Ryder, I said, regarding an excessive force incident last night involving my son, Mason Vance. The officer's fingers froze above the keyboard. He looked up slowly, his eyes narrowing. Ryder, you Mason's dad? I am. The officer leaned back in his chair. Captain Grant is handling that file personally. He said if you came in, I should send you straight back to his office. I walked past the desk and down the hallway. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. Officers paused their conversations to watch me pass. The blue wall was already closing ranks. I didn't knock on Captain Grant's door. I opened it and walked in. Captain Grant was a man I recognized from town fundraisers. Polished appearance, politician smile, expensive watch. He was sitting behind a cluttered desk with a thin file folder open in front of him. He didn't look surprised. Mr. Vance, Grant said, gesturing to the chair. Please sit down. Terrible business about your son. How is he doing? He'll be in a wheelchair for 6 months, I said, remaining standing. I want to see the body cam footage from last night, and I want Ryder's badge. Grant sighed, a long theatrical exhale. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I understand you're upset. Any father would be. But we've reviewed the preliminary reports, and unfortunately, the body cam footage from Officer Ryder's unit experienced a technical malfunction during the incident. A malfunction? I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, Grant said. It happens more often than you'd think. Without that footage, it's essentially the officer's word against a confused teenager who was under extreme stress. My son wasn't confused, I said. He remembers everything. Memory is tricky, Grant said smoothly, especially under traumatic circumstances. And Sergeant Ryder is a decorated officer with 15 years of service. If you pursue this complaint, we'll have to conduct a full investigation. That means looking into Mason's background, his friends, his activities. It was a threat, a polite, bureaucratic threat. Drop it or we'll destroy your son's reputation. Are you threatening my son? I asked quietly. I'm explaining the process, Grant said, his smile tightening. Ryder feels terrible about the accident. He's willing to not press charges for resisting arrest if you're willing to let this go. I think that's fair. Don't you let it go, I repeated, in exchange for not charging my son with a crime he didn't commit. Exactly, Grant said, closing the file. Everyone moves on. Mason heals. We avoid unnecessary legal expenses. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I turned and walked out of his office. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I had everything I needed. They were covering it up, and they were sloppy about it. As I walked through the precinct lobby, a man in a rumpled suit was smoking a cigarette near the side exit. He was thin with graying hair and sharp eyes. He gave me a slight nod toward the alleyway. I followed. You're wasting your time with Grant, the man said quietly. He and Ryder go back 10 years. They cover each other's dirt like it's a job requirement. Who are you? I asked. Felix, he said. Internal affairs, which around here just means I'm the guy everyone hates. Ryder didn't experience a malfunction. He turned off his body cam manually. I saw the system log before Grant scrubbed it. Why are you telling me this? Felix finally looked at me. Because I have a kid Mason's age and because Ryder is a ticking time bomb. But you can't beat them from the front door. You need leverage. Real leverage. I'll find it. I said, be careful, Felix warned. Ryder knew you were coming today. About 20 minutes before you even parked, he got a call. Someone warned him to get his story straight. My blood went cold. Who called him? I don't know, Felix said, but it came from a local number. Someone close to you. 20 minutes before I arrived. That was exactly when I told Brooke I was going to the station. I drove home in a daze. When I walked into the kitchen, Brooke was pacing, her phone clutched in her hand. How did it go? She asked, her voice strained. Grant was expecting me, I said, watching her face closely, almost like he knew I was coming. Brooke's face went pale. Well, I mean, it's a small town, people talk. Yeah, I said, people talk. So, what happened? She pressed. Is it over? Grant said the body cam malfunctioned. I said, he said they dropped the charges against Mason if I walked away. Brooke let out a massive sigh of relief. Oh, thank God. See, Mason will heal, and we can forget this ever happened. I didn't say I accepted it, I said. Brooke froze. What? I didn't accept the deal, I said. I'm going to keep digging. Why can't you just let it go? She screamed, slamming her hand on the counter. Do you want to destroy this family? The family is already destroyed, I said quietly. I'm just trying to figure out who lit the match. She stared at me, then grabbed her keys and stormed toward the door. I can't deal with you right now. I'm going for a drive. I watched her leave. As soon as her car disappeared, my phone buzzed. Subject wife. Just send a text to subject Ryder. I opened the attachment. Brooke. He's not stopping. He knows about the camera. You need to fix this now. I stared at the screen. My wife wasn't just protecting Ryder. She was giving him orders. I walked into my office and locked the door. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they weren't fighting a suburban dad anymore. They were fighting a ghost. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my locked office with the lights off, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. The screenshot of Brooke's text to Ryder burned into my mind. He's not stopping. He knows about the camera. You need to fix this. Now, every word was a confirmation of what I already suspected, but didn't want to believe. My wife wasn't just defending a corrupt cop. She was actively working with him. The question was why. I pulled up an old encryption software I hadn't used since my Black Ops days. Within minutes, I had access to a secure network that technically didn't exist. I typed in Ryder's full name and badge number. The system started pulling data, financial records, property ownership, social media activity, cell tower pings, everything. While the program ran, I opened a separate window and did the same for Brooke. I felt sick doing it, but I had no choice. If she was protecting Ryder, there had to be a connection I'd missed. The first file that popped up was a credit card statement. Brooke had been making cash withdrawals every Friday night for the past 4 months. Always the same amount, $300. Always from the same ATM, near a bar called the Iron Rail on the east side of town. I cross-referenced Ryder's location data. Every Friday night for the past 4 months, his phone pinged off the same cell tower, the one right next to the Iron Rail. My hand stopped moving. I just stared at the screen. They had been meeting regularly for months. I dug deeper. Bank records showed Ryder had deposited irregular sums of cash into his account over the same time period. Not huge amounts, but consistent. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. None of it matched his police salary. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. 2 months ago, Brooke had taken out a second mortgage on our house. $30,000. I never signed anything. I never even knew about it. I opened our joint bank account. The money had been transferred out in 3 separate payments. 2 went to an LLC called Granite Consulting. The third went directly to an account under the name Ryder Callahan. Ryder's account. She had given him $10,000. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial. This was planned. My phone buzzed. It was a message from one of my old contacts, a man named Julian who specialized in digital forensics. Got the police server backup. Sending encrypted file now. Ryder manually disabled his body cam at 21:47, turned it back on at 21:53. 6-minute gap. That's when it happened. The file arrived. I opened it. It was a time-stamped log from the police evidence server. Ryder's body cam had been intentionally shut off. It wasn't a malfunction. It was premeditated. I forwarded the file to a secure cloud and made 3 backup copies. Then I kept digging. I found Ryder's disciplinary file buried in an old database. It had been scrubbed from the main system, but fragments remained. 3 excessive force complaints over the past decade, all of them dismissed. All of them signed off by Captain Grant. One complaint was from a college kid who claimed Ryder had broken his wrist during a traffic stop. Another was from a woman who said Ryder had slammed her face into the hood of her car during an argument with her boyfriend. The third was from a homeless veteran who claimed Ryder had beaten him unconscious behind a grocery store. All dismissed, all buried. Ryder wasn't just corrupt. He was a predator with a pattern. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly closed the laptop and slipped it into my desk drawer. The door handle turned, but it was locked. "Honey," Brooke's voice came through the door. She sounded cautious. "Are you still awake?" "Yeah," I called back. "Just working. I'll be out in a minute." "Okay," she said. There was a long pause. "I'm sorry about earlier. I was just scared. I love you." I didn't respond. After a moment, I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. I waited 10 minutes, then quietly unlocked the door and stepped out. The house was dark. Brooke's bedroom door was closed. I could see the faint glow of her phone screen underneath the crack. I walked to Mason's room. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Can't sleep? Hurts too much," he said, his voice thick. "Dad, why is Mom acting so weird?" I chose my words carefully. "She's going through something right now, but it's not about you. You didn't do anything wrong. She keeps looking at me like she's angry," Mason said, his voice cracking, like I ruined everything. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. What that cop did to you is evil, and I'm going to make sure he pays for it, I promise you." Mason looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "How? They're not going to believe me." "They will," I said, "because I'm going to find proof they can't ignore." "What if you can't?" I looked at my son, broken, scared, doubting everything, and I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to let this system destroy him, even if it meant burning down everything around me. "I will," I said, "even if I have to tear this whole town apart." The next morning, I left the house before Brooke woke up. I drove to a coffee shop on the opposite side of town and met Felix, the internal affairs investigator, in a back corner booth. He slid a manila folder across the table. "This is everything I could pull without getting flagged," Felix said quietly. Ryder's been under investigation twice before. Both times the cases mysteriously disappeared. Captain Grant made sure of it. I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of witness statements, medical reports, and photographs. One photo showed a young man with a broken jaw. Another showed a woman with a black eye and a split lip. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Felix leaned forward. "Because I'm tired of watching him get away with it. And because," he hesitated, "I ran your name through some old military databases. I know what you used to do. I know who you used to be." I didn't respond. "I'm not asking questions," Felix continued. "But if you're planning something, make sure it sticks. Because if you go after Ryder and Miss, he'll come after your whole family." "He already did," I said. Felix nodded slowly. "Then finish it." I left the coffee shop and drove to a storage unit I'd rented under a fake name. Inside was a lockbox containing tools I hadn't touched in 15 years. Surveillance equipment, recording devices, a burner laptop with software that could crack into almost anything. I spent the next 3 days ghost-watching Brooke and Ryder. I planted a small GPS tracker under Brooke's car. I set up a listening device in her home office. I hated doing it, but I needed the truth. On the 4th night, Brooke told me she was meeting a client for dinner. I watched from across the street as she walked into the iron rail. 10 minutes later, Ryder walked in wearing civilian clothes. I recorded everything. The way he touched her lower back as they walked to a booth. The way she laughed at something he said. The way he leaned in close, whispering something that made her face go pale. They stayed for 2 hours. When they left, I followed them. They didn't go to a hotel. They went to a small house on the outskirts of town, Ryder's house. I parked a block away and activated the parabolic microphone I'd set up earlier. The audio was faint but clear enough, Ryder's voice. "He's not going to stop. Your husband is digging. Felix is feeding him information." Brooke's voice panicked. "Then do something. You said you'd handle this, Ryder." "I did handle it. I put the kid in a wheelchair. What more do you want, Brooke?" "That wasn't the plan. You were supposed to scare him, not him," Ryder cold. "Plans change, and if your husband keeps pushing, he's going to have an accident too." Silence. Then Brooke's voice quieter. "You promised me you'd protect me. You said if I helped you, everything would be fine." Ryder laughing darkly. "Yeah, well, you're in too deep now, sweetheart. So, either you get him to back off or I'll make sure both of you disappear." I stopped the recording. I sat in the dark car, my hands shaking with rage. My wife had set up our son and now Ryder was threatening to kill me. I drove home. Brooke wasn't back yet. I went straight to my office, uploaded the recording to the secure cloud and sent copies to 3 separate contacts. Then I sat down and started planning. Not revenge. Not yet. Justice. The next morning, the house felt different. Not because anything had moved, but because now every object had a second meaning. The coffee mugs, the framed family photos, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, everything looked like part of a set on a stage I hadn't realized I'd been standing on. Brooke came into the kitchen in a robe, pretending to yawn, pretending last night was normal life. "You're up early," she said, reaching for the coffee pot. I watched her carefully, couldn't sleep. She poured her coffee, back turned to me. "I was thinking maybe we should look into a rehab center for Mason somewhere out of town. New doctors, new environment. Just fresh start." "Out of town," I repeated. "Yeah," she said quickly. "It might be good for him and for us. This whole thing is toxic. The gossip, the stares, we could step away, let it die down." She wasn't talking like a mother wanting the best care. She was talking like an accomplice wanting distance from a crime scene. "I have some calls to make first," I said. "Then we'll talk about it." Her jaw clenched for a second, then she forced a soft smile. "Sure, just think about it." "Okay." I didn't answer. I checked on Mason. He was awake, headphones on, staring at some show without really watching it. His eyes looked older than 16. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "Depends what that word means now." I sat on the edge of his bed. "I've been digging. About Ryder. About that night. About all of it." Mason looked up quickly. "Are they going to arrest him?" "Not yet," I said. "But I'm building something they can't ignore. I just need you to focus on healing." He hesitated. "What about Mom? She barely talks to me unless she's telling me not to make it worse." I swallowed. "Your mom is scared. And when people are scared, they sometimes choose the wrong side. But that's on them, not you." He looked away, jaw tightening. "Feels like it's on me." I wanted to tell him everything right then about the bar, the house, the recording, but the truth would break him in a way Bones couldn't, not yet. I left him with a hand on his shoulder and went back to my office. Julian had sent over a new data dump overnight. Phone logs, cross-match locations, timestamps, patterns. Brooke, regular Friday cash withdrawals. Ryder, Friday nights at the Iron Rail, both overlapping cell tower hits near a cheap motel on the highway. 3, sometimes 4 times a month. Then I saw it 3 months back. An incoming call to Brooke's phone at 2:13 a.m., saved under unknown work. The number when Julian traced it belonged to a prepaid cell used by Ryder. The call lasted 22 minutes. I didn't need to hear that call to know what kind of conversation lasts 22 minutes at 2 in the morning between a married woman and a cop she barely knows. The betrayal hit in waves. First as anger, then as humiliation, then as something colder, acceptance. She had been gone a long time before last night. I just refused to see it. By noon, I had everything organized into folders on the laptop. Folder 1, Ryder, pattern of violence. Body cam shut-off logs, old complaints. Folder 2, Brooke, money trail, second mortgage, credit card withdrawals. Folder 3, both overlapping locations, text logs, audio from the night at Ryder's house. I printed one thin stack of key pages and slid them into an envelope. This wasn't for a lawyer, not yet. It was for her. Brooke came home around 1 carrying grocery bags she didn't really need. She jumped when she saw me sitting calmly at the dining table. "Hey," she said, too bright. "I got some stuff for Mason. Snacks, drinks, those protein shakes he likes." "Thought, sit down," I said. She froze, then slowly set the bags on the counter. "What's going on?" "Sit," I repeated. She sat. I slid the envelope across the table. "Open it. Honey, if this is about the report, open it." Her fingers shook as she pulled out the pages. First, the bank transfers, then the ATM withdrawals, then the screenshot of her text to Ryder. "You went too far. You said you were just going to scare him." Her face went completely blank. Not shocked, not confused, just exposed. "What is this supposed to prove?" she asked, voice thin. "It proves you weren't surprised when a cop broke our son's legs," I said quietly. "It proves you knew him. It proves you helped him." She laughed once. "Too loud. That's ridiculous. You're twisting things. Those transfers. Ryder was helping with a mong, with a business thing. A side project. I owed him money, that's all. Every Friday night, I asked, the same bar, the same motel, the same withdrawals. You owed him that often." Her cheeks flushed. "You're spying on me now, is that what this is? You break into my privacy and then act like you're the victim? You're not going to flip this on me," I said, my voice still low. "I heard you at his house. I recorded you. You told him that wasn't the plan. You told him he was supposed to scare Mason, not him." Her mouth opened and closed. For a second the mask slipped, then she tried a different one. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You're never home. You haven't been for years. Even when you're here, you're somewhere else." Mason was spiraling. He was hanging out with older kids. He got mouthy with everyone. He talked back to teachers. I was scared he'd end up in real trouble. "So, you called a violent cop?" I said. "My son's own mother called a known bully with a badge and said, 'Teach him a lesson.' I didn't know he'd do that," she snapped, tears finally forming. "Ryder said he'd just rough him up a little. Scare him straight. A scared straight thing like they do with those kids on TV. I never wanted the bones to actually break. I cut in. Just a little fear, a little pain, something he'd remember when you weren't man enough to parent him yourself." "Is that it?" She flinched like I'd hit her. "You think I enjoyed any of this?" She shot back. "Do you know what it's like watching you come back from wherever you went in the military? A ghost in your own house. Do you know what it's like begging you to be present and getting excuses instead?" Ryder listened. "He showed up. He made me feel seen." There it was. The other betrayal wrapped around the first. "So you traded our marriage," I said, "and our son's safety for feeling seen by a man who stomps on teenagers for fun." Tears finally spilled over. "I made a mistake." I shook my head. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is yelling when you should have listened. You made choices over and over. You texted him from our kitchen while our son screamed in the hospital. You warned him when I went to the station. That's not a mistake, that's a side." She stared at me, breathing hard. "What are you going to do?" "I've already started," I said. "Those files, they're backed up in multiple places. Ryder goes down, Grant goes down, and if you stand with them, you go down too." her face drained of color. You do that to the mother of your children. You already did this to the father of your children, I said. And to your son. For the first time, her anger faded and something like fear took over completely. Not fear of Ryder, fear of consequences. What do you want from me? She whispered. Truth, I said on record. Every text, every meeting, who knew what and when. You're going to give it to a lawyer I choose. And then you're going to move out of this house. She shook her head slowly like she could rewind the whole thing. If Ryder finds out I talked, he already threatened us. I said the difference now is I'm not unarmed anymore. She swallowed. I searching my face. Is this revenge? No, I said this is me cleaning up the mess you helped make upstairs. A door creaked. Mason's wheelchair rolled slowly toward the stairs. He'd heard more than either of us realized. Brooke's eyes darted past me. Panic flashed across her face. Don't you dare tell him, she whispered. He has a right to know who broke him, I said. For a moment, the three of us stood in the same house, connected by blood and lies. This was the exact moment my family broke in a way that couldn't be reset or casted, and it was the moment I stopped thinking like a hurt husband and started thinking like the man Ryder should have never picked a fight with. I didn't confront Brooke again that night. I let her sit with the terror of knowing I'd heard everything. Let her wonder what I'd do next. That was part of the strategy. Silence is louder than shouting when the person knows you hold all the cards. I spent the evening with Mason. We didn't talk about his mother. We watched old action movies, the kind with clear heroes and villains, the kind where justice was simple. He fell asleep around 11 o'clock, his breathing finally steady. I waited until midnight, then went back to my office and opened the encrypted files Julian had sent earlier that day. This time, I focused on the money. Brooke's second mortgage, $30,000, had been taken out 6 weeks before Mason's attack. The timing wasn't random. People don't suddenly need that kind of cash unless something forces their hand. I traced the payments again. 2 deposits to Granite Consulting LLC. I ran the business name through every database I had access to. It didn't exist as a registered company. It was a shell, a fake front. But the account routing number led somewhere real, a small credit union in the next county. I called in a favor with an old contact who specialized in financial forensics. By 2 in the morning, I had the answer. Granite Consulting was registered under a single name, Ryder Callahan. Brooke hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been paying him $30,000 over 3 months, funneled through a fake company to hide the trail. But why? I dug into Brooke's personal accounts next, the one she thought I didn't know about. Credit card statements, online shopping, subscription services. Everything looked normal until I found a charge from 8 months ago, $1,500 to a law office in the city. I looked up the firm, Family Law, Divorce Specialists. My stomach dropped. She'd been planning to leave me for months, and she needed Ryder's help to do it cleanly, maybe to threaten me, maybe to build a case, maybe just to have muscle on her side if things got ugly. But something had gone wrong. The payments kept going, even after the lawyer consultation. That meant the plan had changed or escalated. I pulled up the text logs again, the ones Julian had recovered from Brooke's cloud backup. I scrolled back further this time, past the night of Mason's attack, past the summer there, 4 months ago, a thread between Brooke and Ryder. Brooke, I can't keep doing this. He's going to notice the money, Ryder, then we move up the timeline. You said he's got that old military insurance policy, right? The one that pays out big if something happens. Brooke, yes, but that's not Ryder, just saying. Accidents happen, especially to guys who don't know when to quit. My hands froze over the keyboard. They weren't just hiding an affair, they were discussing my death. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. Brooke, I didn't ask you to say things like that. Ryder, you didn't have to. You came to me because you wanted a way out. I'm giving you options. Brooke, I wanted a divorce. Not this, Ryder. Divorce splits everything. My way. You keep it all. Think about it. There was a 3-day gap. Then Brooke, what about Mason? He's been getting in my way. Asking questions. Ryder, kid needs discipline anyway. Let me handle him. Scare him quiet. Make him respect authority. 2 birds. Brooke, just scare him. Nothing permanent. Ryder, sure. Whatever you say. I closed the laptop. My chest felt like it was caving in. Brooke hadn't just allowed the attack. She'd asked for it. Mason was collateral damage in a plan to isolate me, control me, maybe even kill me for the insurance payout. And Ryder had gone further than she wanted. Not because he was out of control, but because he enjoyed it. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I opened the laptop again and made copies of everything. I sent them to 3 separate encrypted cloud accounts. I printed hard copies and locked them in a fireproof safe. If Ryder wanted to make me disappear, he was going to find out what happens when you target a man trained to survive worse than small-town corruption. I walked upstairs. Brooke's bedroom door was closed. I could see the faint glow of her phone under the crack. She was still awake, probably texting him, probably planning her next move. I didn't knock. I just stood there for a moment, listening to her shallow breathing on the other side. Then I walked into Mason's room. He was asleep, his face finally peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. I knelt beside his bed and whispered, "I'm going to fix this, I promise." He didn't wake up, but I needed to say it out loud to someone, to myself, because tomorrow, the war moved from recon to action, and Ryder Callahan had no idea what was coming. Morning came with a knock on the door I'd been expecting. Harper Sinclair stood on my porch holding a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of sharp suit that said she didn't lose often. She was a civil rights attorney I'd researched for 3 days before reaching out. Her track record against police misconduct was flawless. 12 cases, 12 wins. "Mr. Vance," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "You said on the phone you had something I needed to see." I led her to my office and closed the door. I handed her the folder, organized, labeled, chronological. She sat down and started reading. I washed her face. It didn't change much at first. Lawyers are trained to stay neutral. But when she got to the text logs between Brooke and Ryder, her jaw tightened. When she reached the part about the insurance policy and accidents happen, she looked up. "This is your wife," she said quietly. "Was," I corrected. She stopped being my wife the moment she traded our son's safety for whatever Ryder promised her. Harper closed the folder and leaned back. "This is explosive. The texts alone are enough to open a criminal investigation. The financial trail, the body cam shut down, the prior complaints. It's a pattern. It's prosecutable, but I ask because there was always a but the department will fight this like their lives depend on it." Harper said because they do. "If Ryder goes down, Captain Grant goes down. If Grant goes down, the whole precinct gets investigated. They'll throw everything at us. They'll attack Mason's credibility. They'll attack yours, and they'll make your wife disappear this evidence if they get the chance." "They won't get the chance," I said. "I have backups in 4 locations, hard copies in a safe deposit box, digital copies with people they'll never find." Harper studied me. "You're not just a concerned father, are you?" "I used to do work the government doesn't talk about," I said. "Let's leave it at that." She nodded slowly. "Okay, here's what we do. We file a federal civil rights lawsuit. We bypass the local system entirely and go straight to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. We also request the state attorney general open a criminal investigation into both Ryder and Grant." "How long?" "Months," she said. "Maybe a year. These things move slow." "I don't have a year," I said. "Ryder threatened to make me disappear. He's not going to wait for a court date." Harper's expression hardened. "Then we need protection. I'll contact the FBI today. They can put your family under monitoring if there's a credible threat." "My family is already under monitoring." I said mine. She didn't ask what I meant. She just packed up the folder and stood. "I'll start the paperwork today." "But Mr. Vance, be careful. Men like Ryder don't go quietly, and they don't go alone." After Harper left, I got a text from Julian. "Julian, we need to meet. Found something. Can't send digitally." I drove to the edge of town, where an abandoned rail yard stretched out like a graveyard of rusted metal. Julian was waiting near an old boxcar, smoking a cigarette. He looked nervous. "What did you find?" I asked. He handed me a USB drive. The original body cam footage, the real one, before it was edited. I stared at the drive. "How all footage gets backed up to an off-site server," Julian explained. "It's supposed to be automatic, untouchable, but guys are lazy. They use the same password for everything. Took me 2 days, but I got in. Does anyone know you took this?" "Not yet," Julian said. "But once you use it, they'll figure out someone accessed the server. You need to move fast." I pocketed the drive. "What's on it?" Julian's face went dark. "Everything." Mason on his knees, hands up, begging. Ryder walking over, the kick, the stomp, the laughter, and the worst part, Captain Grant's voice in the background telling Ryder to make it quick. My blood went cold. Grant was there. He was supervising, Julian said. This wasn't just Ryder going rogue. This was sanctioned, I felt the rage building again, but I forced it down. Rage makes mistakes. I needed to be ice. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, Julian warned. If they find out I gave you this, my career is over, maybe worse. So, whatever you're planning, make it count. I drove home and uploaded the footage to the encrypted cloud. Then, I sent a copy to Harper with a single message. This is the evidence. Use it. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Vance, a woman's voice said. My name is Natalie Cross. I'm a federal prosecutor with the Civil Rights Division. Your attorney contacted us. I've reviewed the preliminary materials. We'd like to open an official investigation. How long? I asked. We can have agents on the ground within 48 hours, Natalie said. But I need you to do something for me. What? Stay alive, she said. Men like Ryder don't react well to being cornered. If he suspects you're building a case, he might escalate. Do you have somewhere safe you can take your son? I'm not running, I said. I'm not asking you to run, Natalie said. I'm asking you to be smart. We need you and Mason alive to testify. I hung up and looked at Mason asleep in his wheelchair by the window. He looked so small, so breakable, but I wasn't going to let him break any further. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Ryder's number, one I'd pulled from Brooks' locks. Me, I know everything, every text, every payment, every threat. You have 24 hours to turn yourself in or I release it all. I hit send. The war had just gone loud. Ryder didn't turn himself in. I didn't expect him to. What I did expect was silence. What I got was an ambush. 2 days after I sent that text, Harper called me at 6 in the morning. Her voice was clipped. Professional, but I could hear the tension underneath. They're moving fast. She said the department filed a motion to dismiss our case, but that's not the problem. The problem is they filed criminal charges against Mason. I went cold. What charges? Assault on a police officer. Resisting arrest. They're claiming Mason attacked Ryder first, and that Ryder's actions were justified self-defense. They're using the edited body cam footage as evidence, and they've scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow. That's impossible, I said. We have the real footage. We do, Harper agreed. But they don't know that yet. And here's the other problem. They've subpoenaed Brooke as a witness for them. My stomach dropped. She's testifying against Mason. Against you? Actually, Harper said, they're going to paint you as a paranoid ex-military father who's manipulating his injured son to get revenge on law enforcement, and they're going to use your wife to do it. I hung up and immediately called Brooke. She didn't answer. I drove to the house, our house, and found her car in the driveway. I walked in without knocking. She was in the kitchen, packing a suitcase. Going somewhere? I asked. She jumped then straightened up trying to look calm. I'm staying with my sister for a few days. This whole thing is too much. You're testifying tomorrow, I said, for Ryder. Her face went pale. I don't have a choice. They subpoenaed me. If I don't show up, they'll arrest me. You always have a choice, I said. You can tell the truth. She laughed bitterly. The truth? You mean the truth that makes me look like a monster? That I was having an affair? That I took out a second mortgage to pay off my boyfriend? That I asked him to scare our son? You think that helps anyone? It helps Mason. I said it proves Ryder planned this. It destroys me. She shot back, and it destroys you too. They'll say you're an angry husband trying to weaponize your son to get back at me. Either way, Mason loses. I stepped closer. What did they offer you? She froze. What? Ryder Grant, they're lawyers. What did they offer you in exchange for lying on the stand? She looked away. Immunity, from any charges related to the second mortgage or the payments. And they said they'd make sure I keep the house in the divorce. There it was, the final betrayal. She was willing to sacrifice our son's justice to save herself. Get out, I said quietly. This is my house too. Get out, I repeated, my voice like steel. Before I forget, you're the mother of my children. She grabbed her suitcase and left without another word. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Local reporters, curious neighbors, off-duty cops filling the back rows like a show of force. Mason sat beside me in his wheelchair, his hands shaking in his lap. Harper leaned over and whispered, "No matter what happens today, stay calm. Don't react. We need you steady." Judge Daphne Carver entered and everyone stood. She was a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd researched her the night before. Clean record, no obvious ties to the department, but I knew better than to trust appearances. The prosecutor, a man named Colin Drake, stood first. He was everything I expected: slick suit, confident smile, voice like honey over glass. "Your Honor," Colin began, "this case is simple. A troubled teenager with a history of defiance attacked a decorated police officer during a lawful traffic stop. The officer defended himself. The teenager was injured in the struggle. Now, the father, a man with a documented history of paranoia and violence stemming from his military service, is trying to weaponize his son's injury to launch a baseless attack on law enforcement." I felt Mason tense beside me. Harper put a hand on my arm. Colin continued, "We have body cam footage showing the struggle. We have the officer's testimony, and we have the testimony of the boy's own mother, who will confirm that her husband has been unstable, and that Mason has a pattern of aggressive behavior." Harper stood. "Your Honor, the defense has evidence that directly contradicts." "You'll have your turn, Miss Sinclair." Judge Carver said, "Mr. Drake, call your first witness." The state calls Brooke Vance. Brooke walked to the stand. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Mason. She looked straight ahead like a soldier following orders. Colin approached her gently. "Mrs. Vance, can you describe your husband's behavior over the past year?" Brooke's voice was quiet but clear. "He's been distant, angry, he has nightmares. He talks about people following him. He's obsessed with conspiracy theories. I've been worried about him for a long time." "And your son Mason?" "Mason has been difficult," Brooke said. "He talks back. He's been hanging around older kids. I've tried to discipline him, but his father undermines me. He tells Mason that authority figures are corrupt, that the system is against us. He's filled Mason's head with distrust. I watched her lie with the same face I used to kiss goodnight." Colin nodded sympathetically. "And when Mason was injured, how did your husband react?" "He immediately blamed the police. Brooke said he didn't even consider that Mason might have done something wrong. He just started building this case, obsessing over it, pulling our family apart." "Thank you," Colin said. "No further questions." Harper stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Vance, are you currently having an affair with Sergeant Ryder?" The courtroom went silent. Brooke's face drained of color. What? No, that's ridiculous." Harper walked to the evidence table and picked up a folder. "Your Honor, I have phone records, text messages, and bank statements showing that Mrs. Vance has been in a romantic and financial relationship with the defendant officer for over 6 months." Judge Carver leaned forward. "Approach." Both lawyers walked to the bench. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw Colin's face go red. I saw the judge's expression harden. When they returned, Judge Carver looked directly at Brooke. "Mrs. Vance, I'm ordering you to answer the question truthfully. Are you having an affair with Sergeant Ryder?" Brooke's hands shook. She looked at Colin. He gave her a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. Harper didn't wait. "And did you ask Sergeant Ryder to scare your son, Mason, before the incident?" Brooke's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for him to get hurt. I just wanted a Ryder to talk to him, to make him understand consequences. But it went wrong. It all went wrong." The room exploded again. Judge Carver called for order, but I didn't hear any of it because I was looking at Mason. His face was frozen in shock, his mouth slightly open, staring at his mother like she was a stranger. And in that moment, my son learned the cruelest lesson of his life, that the people who hurt you the most are sometimes the ones who were supposed to protect you. Judge Carver adjourned the hearing. Teeper grabbed my arm as the courtroom emptied. "We won," she said. Her testimony just destroyed their entire case, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like losing everything that mattered. The house was too quiet that night. Mason hadn't spoken a full sentence since court. He'd stared out the car window the whole ride home, jaw clenched, eyes dry in that scary way that meant the hurt was too deep for tears. He wheeled himself straight to his room, shut the door, and didn't answer when I knocked. I gave him space. "Pain like that, you can't talk someone out of it. You can only stand close enough so they don't feel abandoned," Harper called around 9 o'clock. "You sitting down?" she asked. "I'm past that," I said. "What's next?" "Judge Carver just signed off on our emergency motion," Harper said. "Based on Brooke's admissions and the evidence you gave me, she's allowed a supplemental filing. The federal prosecutor, Natalie, is flying in tomorrow. She wants an in-person meeting with you and Mason. That fast." Brooke blew their whole narrative apart on the stand. Harper said, "The judge isn't saying it out loud yet, but you can feel it. She knows this stinks all the way up the chain." I hung up and sat alone in the kitchen staring at the family photos on the wall, Brooke smiling, Mason holding a trophy. All of it felt staged now, like a lie we all agreed to live in. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Vance, I answered. You like the show today? Ryder's voice oozed through the line. Smug and poison slick. Your wife did great. Almost felt bad for you. Almost. You're done, I said quietly. Everyone in that courtroom watched her admit you two plotted to scare a minor. The only question now is how hard you fall. He laughed. You really think some crying wife and a fancy lawyer can touch me? Grant's already working damage control. By the time this hits internal review, those files will vanish. Carver will be reassigned and you'll be the crazy vet who got played. I didn't answer. Let him talk. You want a tip, soldier boy? Ryder went on. Take the deal when they offer it. Little settlement money, no admission of guilt. Everyone walks. You can buy your kid a nice new chair. I sent the unedited body cam footage to the feds. I said calmly, with audio of Grant telling you to make it quick, and the recording of you threatening to make me disappear. So, no, there's not going to be a quiet settlement. Silence, then a shift in his tone, less smug, more dangerous. You're dead, he said. You just don't know when yet. He hung up. Instead of calling Natalie or Harper, I forwarded the call log to Julian. He texted back one word, logged. If Ryder made a move now, it wouldn't look like an accident. It would look like a man trying to clean up his own mess. The next day, Harper and Natalie came to the house. Natalie was all business. Dark blazer, hair pulled back, eyes that looked like they'd seen every excuse in the book, and didn't buy any. She set a small recorder on the coffee table and sat across from Mason and me. Mason, she said gently, I know you're exhausted, but what you say today matters. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. Can you do that? He swallowed, then nodded. He told her everything. The taillight stopped weeks ago, the way Ryder smiled at him. The night of the attack, hands up, ground rushing toward him, the weight on his knee, the sound of bone cracking, the laughter. He never once looked at me while he talked. He stared at a spot on the wall like if he met my eyes, he'd fall apart. When he was done, Natalie clicked off the recorder. You were very brave, she said. I need you to understand something, Mason. None of this is your fault. What happened to you is a crime, and we're going to treat it like one. He just nodded, eyes hollow. After he wheeled back to his room, Natalie turned to me. Here's where we are, with the body cam footage, the texts, Brooks' testimony, and Mason's statement. We have enough to open a federal criminal case against Ryder and likely Grant. We'll move for obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, excessive force, conspiracy, the works. How long before they're actually arrested? I asked. In a clean world, a week, she said. In this world depends how fast they panic and who tries to shield them. They're already panicking, I said. Ryder called last night. Threatened me. Good, Natalie replied. I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. Threats mean fear, she said. Fear means mistakes. We want him sloppy. Meanwhile, Judge Carver called me personally this morning. She requested the full unedited footage from us, not from the department. That tells me something. She doesn't trust them, I said. Or she's trying to cover herself, Natalie added. Either way, it's movement. That afternoon, things started breaking loose. Local news ran a story, a fair allegations rock police brutality case. They didn't have the full story, but it was enough. Rumors about a cop, a married woman, and a teenager in a wheelchair. The department tried to spin it, releasing a statement about unfounded attacks and smear campaigns. Then someone leaked a still frame from the unedited body cam footage. Ryder's boot hovering above Mason's bent leg. They blurred Mason's face. They didn't blur the badge. By evening, there were people with signs outside the precinct. Not a huge crowd, but loud enough. Protect our kids. No badge above the law. From the kitchen window, I watched it on the news while hearing it live through the cracked open back door. Two different feeds of the same truth. Brooke called around 8. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was shaky. I didn't know they'd leak it. She said, people are calling me names. The kids at Violet's school, they're saying things. I messed up. I know that, but I'm still their mother. Please don't turn them against me. I saved the message. Not out of sympathy, out of habit. Everything was evidence now of character, of motive, of remorse, or the lack of it. Later that night, the knock on the door wasn't gentle. I opened it to find Julian breathing hard, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one day. They suspended him, Julian said without preamble. Ryder administrative leave. Same with Grant. Word is the state. AG got a call from Natalie's office. Nobody's saying it out loud, but everyone in that building knows. This isn't going away. He ran a hand through his hair. They're pissed at me, he admitted. They don't know what I did yet, but they're circling. I'm probably done here when this is over. You knew that when you pulled the footage, I said. He gave a tired half smile. Yeah, guess I did. We stood there a moment, two men on different sides of the same line, both knowing lines had blurred. One more thing, Julian said. There's a rumor Carver is going to call an emergency hearing next week. Not about Mason, about the department policy review, possible appointment of an outside monitor. That was big. Bigger than I'd planned for. It meant this wasn't just about my son anymore. It was about every kid, every person who'd ever landed under Ryder's boot and been told they tripped. After Julian left, I checked on Mason again. He was awake, staring at his phone. You see the news? I asked. Yeah, he said. People are texting me. Kids from school. Some say they're sorry, some say I'm lying, some are just watching. How do you feel about that? He thought for a second. I don't know. Exposed, I guess. But also like, maybe it wasn't for nothing, he said quietly. Like maybe this actually changes something. I sat down on the edge of his bed. It already has. He looked at me then. Really? Looked at me for the first time since court. You're not going to hurt him, are you? He asked. Ryder? I asked. Yeah, Mason said. I know what you used to do. I've heard pieces. Mom, she'd say you were dangerous when you're mad. I don't want you to go to jail for me. I took a breath. I'm not going to be the one who lays a hand on him, I said. I'm going to let his own choices crush him. I just moved the spotlight. He studied my face like he was trying to see if that was the whole truth. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe there was a part of me that still wanted something more direct, more satisfying. But that part didn't get a vote anymore. Not with my son watching. Outside, the chanting at the precinct got louder. Inside, for the first time since this began, something shifted in the air. Not peace, but momentum. The news spread faster than fire. By the next morning, reporters camped outside the house, their vans lined across the curb, and tennis sticking up like spears. Some shouted questions when I stepped out to get the mail. Words like revenge, cover up, affair. Cameras flashed as if any picture could capture the truth of this mess. Inside, Mason watched from his window, silent. The noise outside didn't rattle him anymore. He had been through worse in one single night than most of them ever would in their lives. Her called before noon. They've officially launched a federal investigation, she said, sounding both exhausted and triumphant. Ryder's suspended without pay. Grant's been placed on administrative leave, and Natalie got the Department of Justice involved. They're assigning a civil rights task force. The wall was cracking. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. What about Brooke? I asked. She's not answering my calls. They're questioning her today. Harper said she's trying to cut a deal. Cooperation for immunity. She's scared. Adrian, the prosecutors have her texts, the bank records, the call between her and Ryder outside the hospital. She's boxed in. Good. Fear was the only language Brooke ever understood. Now, the hours passed slow. Mason's physical therapist came over in the afternoon, working with him on standing for 10 seconds at a time. It looked painful, but he kept pushing, face tight, breath sharp. When he collapsed back into the chair, sweat dripping, he managed a small grin. 2 more seconds than yesterday, he said. That grin, that small bit of defiance, was everything I needed to keep going. Later that evening, Harper and Natalie came by. They looked tired, but satisfied. Ryder's arrest warrant will be official by sunrise. Natalie said, "We have everything. Video, financial motive, conspiracy proof, text data. He won't get bail on this. And Grant's next. He's already trying to shift blame." I nodded. What happens to Brooke? She's cooperating, Harper said quietly. She confessed to conspiring to intimidate Mason and tampering with evidence. But with her testifying against Ryder and Grant, they'll go lenient, probably probation. Mason overheard that from the hallway. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared out the window, then murmured, "So, she just gets to walk away." Harper tried to soften her tone. Sometimes justice doesn't come balanced. Sometimes you take down the worst to stop the rot. He looked at me instead of her. You promised there'd be justice. There will be, I said. He shook his head a little and wheeled back to his room, door closing with quiet finality. Natalie sighed. He's not wrong to feel that way, but he'll understand when he's older. No, I said he should understand now. That truth alone still counts for something. They left soon after. I sat on the couch for hours watching the glow of police lights ahead of schedule on the news. Ryder being led out of the station in cuffs. The same smirk he wore in the hospital hallway was gone. His head was down now, his badge already stripped from his shirt. When Mason wheeled into the living room, the light from the television caught his face. He just stared at the screen, expression unreadable. "That's him," I said quietly. "Does it fix what he did?" Mason asked. "No, but it ends what he started." He nodded slowly, the faintest trace of peace showing through. "Then I guess that's enough." He turned his chair toward the hallway, but paused halfway. "Mom called me earlier," he said, voice steady. "She wanted to visit, and I told her not yet. Not until I can stand again," he said. "She doesn't get to walk in while I'm still broken." When he rolled away, I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The crowd outside the courthouse was cheering. Reporters shouted slogans like "Justice wins" and "Accountability for all." But the noise was hollow. None of them had seen the hospital room. None of them had carried a bleeding son through a corridor while the man responsible walked away laughing. That part wasn't justice. That part was memory. Mine alone. The following morning, the front page was a headline that almost didn't feel real. "Corrupt Sergeant Arrested. Federal Investigation Expands into Department." Beneath it was a photo of Mason leaving physical therapy, leaning on a walker. Harper had called it hope in motion. I called it recovery. Later that week, Brooke came by. She didn't knock, just stood on the porch, eyes red, hair loose, hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she said through the glass door. "For everything. I can't undo it. I needed you both to know. I see what I've done." For a long minute I didn't move. Then I opened the door, but only far enough for her words to pass through. "Mason will forgive you when he's ready," I said. "I won't stop him, but you don't come back here." "Not now." Tears spilled down her face. She nodded once and walked away without looking back. I stood there until her car disappeared around the corner. Finally, the noise in my head, the years of discipline, anger, and betrayal went quiet. The storm that had ripped this family apart had burned itself out. What was left wasn't peace yet, but the kind of calm you feel after surviving something that should have destroyed you. Inside, I heard Mason calling from his room. "Dad, watch this." I turned and saw him push himself up from the chair, trembling arms locked against the walker, taking one halting, shaking step forward. One step, I crossed the room in an instant, catching him before he lost balance. He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months, tears mixing with the laughter as his grip tightened on my shirt. "See," he said, voice shaky but proud. "Told you I would." And for the first time, when someone said the word justice, I didn't think of revenge. I thought of this, my son on his feet again, both of us standing in what was left of a life that finally had room to start again. The storm was finally gone, not past gone, and the silence it left behind wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time in almost a year, our house didn't feel haunted. No reporters out front, no letters from lawyers, no calls in the middle of the night. Just quiet. The kind that lets you hear your own heartbeat and believe for once that everything really might be okay. Mason was walking again, not perfectly. His right leg dragged slightly if he got tired, but he was walking. Every squeak of his crutches against the floor had been replaced by the steady rhythm of a boy who refused to stay broken. I watched from the porch that morning as he tossed a ball back and forth with Violet. The early autumn air was cool, sunlight spilling through half-bare trees. Mason missed a pass, stumbled, and laughed like the sound itself was a victory. It felt right, like life had finally started again. That moment never made the news, but to me, it was the only headline that mattered. He stood again. Ryder didn't get that ending. He sat in a federal courtroom, stripped of his badge, while Natalie Cross and her team presented the same footage he'd once believed no one would see. The laughter he once believed only his partner would ever hear now rang out through a courtroom full of strangers, and every single one of them witnessed exactly who he truly was. He didn't contest the verdict. His attorneys pushed for a plea deal, but the evidence left no room for doubt, and the crimes ran far too deep. 2 counts, civil rights violations and aggravated assault. 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Grant took a plea on 2 lesser charges. The captain who had once smiled proudly through city parades now left behind a shattered reputation buried in that same plea deal: perjury, tampering with evidence, stripped of his retirement, forced to surrender his pension, with no path back to reinstatement. Seeing his resignation splashed across the news felt like justice served cold. It didn't bring rage or triumph, it simply closed a chapter that needed closing. Brooke's story unfolded differently. She stood in that very same building 2 months later, palms sweating as she admitted to everything she'd done. She received probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. Plenty of people said she got off far too easy. Maybe they weren't wrong, but no sentence could ever repair the damage she saw reflected every time she looked at our son. She called occasionally, quiet, hesitant calls, apologies, small updates, uncomfortable pauses where I could sense her circling around a request for something shaped like forgiveness, though she never quite found the courage to say the word outright. Mason spoke with her twice, brief exchanges. He didn't hate her, but he didn't trust her either, and trust, once it breaks, doesn't mend nearly as quickly as bone does. 6 months later, our world had grown quieter, smaller, yet somehow far stronger than before. Harper had remained in touch, checking in almost every week to make sure the Department of Justice's reforms were actually holding. For a stretch of time, every week seemed to bring another headline. Dozens of old cases reopened, a chief placed under investigation, an audit exposing deep internal corruption. None of it restored the full use of Mason's legs, but it meant that no other father would ever have to sit in a hospital the way I once did, listening to his son cry, while the man responsible walked away free. That, in the end, was enough. One morning, Harper called out of nowhere. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. "I try to avoid it these days," I said. "We prefer our victories quiet now." She laughed softly. "Fair enough. Just thought you should know. Judge Carver is launching a new oversight board for law enforcement conduct. She wants to know if you'd be willing to consult." I laughed once, genuinely caught off guard. "Me? After everything that's happened?" "Precisely because of everything that's happened," Harper said. "You've seen firsthand what real damage looks like. That kind of perspective is exactly what changes broken systems." I didn't say yes immediately, but that night, staring at the framed photograph on the mantel of Mason standing tall on his own 2 feet, smiling despite every scar, something became clear to me. Maybe healing wasn't meant to stay personal. Maybe it was something you carried forward piece by piece, so that no one else ever had to bear that same weight completely alone. That weekend, we left town for the first time since everything had started, just the 3 of us, myself, Mason, and Violet. 2 hours up the coast, to a small rented cabin with no cell reception at all. Mason sat in the passenger seat, window rolled down, hair whipping wildly in the wind. A scar ran along the side of his knee that would never fully disappear, but he no longer tried to hide it. He wore shorts, let the sun hit his skin, as if wearing proof that survival could still look like freedom. "You ever think about him?" he asked suddenly. "Ryder," I said. He nodded. "Yeah," I admitted. "But not the way I used to, not with anger anymore, just as a reminder." "Of what?" I paused for a moment. "Of how quickly power can rot when nobody questions it, and how important it is that we always do." He went quiet for a while, watching the waves break against the cliffs below. "I guess we actually did it, huh? We made sure people finally saw the truth." "You did," I said. "You stood up, literally and figuratively. You reminded everyone that doing what's right was never about fear. It's about truth." He smiled faintly. "Still sounds strange hearing you use a word like figuratively." "Don't get used to it," I said with a smirk. That night, sitting around the bonfire outside the cabin, Violet roasted marshmallows while Mason strummed a battered old guitar he'd found in the cabin's storage room. His playing wasn't particularly good, but it wasn't meant to be. It was simply noise that didn't hurt anymore, sound that finally belonged to peace instead of pain. For once, I didn't find myself replaying everything in my head. I wasn't thinking about betrayal, or case files, or revenge. I was thinking about starting over. About how the hardest battles in life aren't won with fists or weapons, but with patience, love, and time. Ryder had held power, Grant had held rank, Brooke had held her lies, but Mason held the truth, and in the end, that's what actually endured. The fire burned low as the sky deepened into midnight blue. I looked up at the stars, the same ones that had watched over us through our darkest nights, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace, not vengeance, not victory. Just peace. Weeks later, the town organized a memorial event honoring victims of police violence. Mason hesitated at first about speaking, but Harper eventually convinced him. He stood before a modest crowd, wind tossing his hair, the microphone trembling slightly in his grip, though his voice never wavered. "I used to believe that being broken meant the story was over," he said. "Now I understand it just means the story changes direction. You don't stop fighting because you've fallen, you keep fighting because you still matter, and because other people need to see you stand back up." When he stepped away from the microphone, the crowd applauded. I didn't clap. I was too busy wiping away tears to make any sound at all. He turned toward me, found my eyes, and smiled. "We're good now, right?" I nodded. "Better than good." That night, we drove home in comfortable silence. Mason slept for most of the drive. Violet dozed against the window. I simply drove, no particular destination in mind, just the steady hum of tires against pavement and the weight finally lifting from my shoulders. At a stoplight, I glanced at Mason in the rearview mirror, his head tilted slightly to one side, peaceful, healed in every way that truly mattered. And I understood then that this had never really been a revenge story at all. It never was. It was always a story about survival, about fathers who refuse to give up, sons who refuse to break, and truth that simply cannot be buried, no matter who tries.